Hello, everyone. Welcome to Talk Talk Speak Podcast. Today, we're embarking on a deep dive. You're looking to cut through the noise and really understand what's happening with complex issues. Right, that's our mission. Today, we're dissecting a significant event, the recent U.S. congressional hearing on AI, which took place on May 8th, 2025.
Yeah, this was a big one. The Senate Committee on Commerce, Science, and Transportation, they held this hearing specifically called Winning the AI Race, Strengthening U.S. Capabilities in Computing and Innovation. I mean, the title alone tells you a lot about the stakes.
Exactly. The core aim was figuring out how the U.S. can really boost its game in computing and innovation with a laser focus on artificial intelligence. It definitely signals that the government sees AI as, well, foundational for the future. Feels like a real turning point, maybe driven by some powerful forces.
Absolutely. You've got the intense global competition, right? Especially with China. Plus, the new administration has its own policy leanings.
Right.
And then just the sheer speed AI tech is moving at, it all kind of forces the issue.
Makes sense. And who were the key players testifying? Some big names from tech were there.
Oh, yeah. They brought in leaders covering different parts of the AI puzzle. You had Sam Altman from OpenAI.
A Noddles guy.
Right. Lisa Su from AMD.
Hardware chips.
Crucial. Brad Smith from Microsoft.
Cloud platforms.
And Michael Intrater from CoreWeave. They do specialized cloud infrastructure.
So infrastructure, hardware, software, models, pretty much the whole supply chain.
Okay.
And our mission here for this deep dive is to really pull out the most important insights from the analysis of that hearing.
Yeah, we want to equip you with a solid grasp of the key issues, potential policy shifts coming down the pike, and what it all means for AI's future, basically.
Okay, let's unpack this. So first big thing, it seems like the industry leaders were, maybe surprisingly, kind of singing from the same hymn sheet.
That's a great observation.
Yeah.
Yeah, the overwhelming message coming from them was a call for light intervention. That was the phrase bouncing around. Light touch regulation for AI.
Light touch.
Right.
Right. What's behind that? What minimal rules?
Well, the number one concern seems to be, don't stifle innovation. They argue that if the rules get too heavy too soon, the U.S. could lose its edge, especially, and they mention this a lot, against China.
That fear of falling behind.
Exactly. Heavy regulation now could mean playing catch-up later.
Interesting, though, because didn't some of them, like Altman at OpenAI, seem more open to some regulation before? Feels like a bit of a shift.
It does, yeah. The analysis suggests they're really worried about specific types of regulation now. Things like what they see as the EU's command and control style. And especially pre-approval processes for AI systems. Altman apparently called that idea potentially disastrous.
So the fear is getting bogged down in bureaucracy, slowing everything down.
That's the core of it. And linked to that, they were pretty clear on where regulation should come from, if it has to come.
Let me guess, federal level.
Bingo! A unified federal framework, not, a messy patchwork of state laws.
Altman actually mentioned that, right? The nightmare of 50 different sets of rules.
He did. They want consistency, predictability, something they can plan around.
And Senator Ted Cruz seems to be on board with this lighter approach. He's pushing this regulatory sandbox idea. Tell us about that.
Right, the regulatory sandbox. The idea is basically to create a less restrictive space specifically for AI innovation to happen. Think back to the early internet kind of a let it grow phase before heavy rules came in.
So a safe zone to experiment without hitting regulatory walls immediately.
Pretty much. And that ties into this push for federal preemption, too. The idea that federal AI laws should override state ones to keep things simple and national.
Okay. Makes sense from their perspective. Here's where it gets really interesting. Yeah. Let's shift gears a bit. The hearing wasn't just about rules. It was also massively about the nuts and bolts.
Yeah.
The infrastructure needed.
Oh, absolutely critical. The energy required for all this AI computing, for the data centers, it's staggering. The Department of Energy, they're predicting data centers could eat up, 12% of all U.S. electricity by 2028?
12%. That's huge.
Yeah.
Just for data centers.
It is. And Altman even talked about a dual revolution, like AI progress is tied directly to needing a revolution in energy production.
So you can't have one without the other, essentially.
That's the argument, which is why they were pushing hard for faster approvals for energy projects, get the power plants and grids built faster.
And Microsoft's Brad Smith pointed fingers at specific delays.
Yeah, he mentioned challenges with permits from the Army Corps of Engineers. So it's not just generation, it's the whole process of building the infrastructure.
Red tape again. Okay, so more power, faster, And obviously, the data centers themselves need to scale up massively, too.
No question. You need places to put all those processors. Altman mentioned OpenAI's huge Stargate project down in Texas.
Stargate, right. Sounds massive.
And companies like CoreWeave, they're focused specifically on building that specialized cloud infrastructure that AI really needs. It's not just any cloud.
Gotcha. And you can't talk infrastructure without talking chips.
Yeah.
Semiconductors.
Absolutely central. Huge support voiced for the IPS and Science Act, the push to bring chip manufacturing back to the U.S.
Lisa Su from AMD was big on that.
Very much so. Stressed the need for a strong domestic supply chain. Because even if the U.S. designs the best chips, if you can't make them reliably...
You're vulnerable. Okay.
Yeah.
So it's this whole web. Energy, data centers, chips, all needing to grow together fast. Sounds like a massive challenge.
It is, and it pulls in all sorts of other policy areas, right? Energy policy, environmental rules, what local communities want, getting the balance right, getting a coherent national strategy. That's going to be tricky. Could be real bottlenecks otherwise.
Okay, let's zoom out again. The global picture. The U.S.-China AI competition was a constant theme, wasn't it?
Looming over everything, yeah. It's framed now not just as tech competition, but national economic security. Global power. And there are real worries about China's sort of state-controlled approach and what that means if they pull ahead.
And the U.S. industry has a strategy for winning this race.
Their big push is for global adoption of the U.S. AI stack. Get the world using American chips, American models, American platforms.
Make U.S. tech the standard. Brad Smith called that the primary factor.
He did. The idea is if everyone's using your ecosystem, you're in the lead.
But isn't there a tension there?
Right.
Promoting your tech globally versus controlling who gets it. Export controls and all that.
Huge tension, yeah. They warned against making export controls too strict. The fear is if allies can't easily get U.S. AI tech, maybe they turn to China instead. Lisa Su specifically said partners need access to U.S. platforms.
Keep the partners close, basically don't push them away.
Right. And she also talked about an open ecosystem.
Why open? What's the thinking there?
Well, the argument is that openness can actually drive innovation faster. More eyes on the tech, more collaboration, maybe even better security because flaws get found quicker.
Interesting.
But yeah, like you said, it's tricky. Promoting openness while trying to maintain a strategic edge and knowing other countries might want their own capabilities anyway, it's complex geopolitics.
Okay, let's bring it back to Capitol Hill. Seems like there's broad agreement in Congress, both parties, that U.S. leadership in AI is important.
Definitely bipartisan consensus on the goal of leadership. But underneath that, senators are raising different kinds of concerns. Lots of nuances.
Like what specific worries are bubbling up?
Well, you hear concerns about cybersecurity. Naturally, AI systems getting hacked or misused. Data privacy is a big one.
Always is.
And AI-generated misinformation. Deepfakes, especially. That came up quite a bit.
Any specific senators focusing on particular areas?
Yeah, Senator Cantwell was talking about keeping AI development paths open, leveraging the TPS Act. Senator Klobuchar is really focused on, fraud, deepfakes, needing basic rules of the road.
Okay.
And Senator Markey brought up the environmental footprint, all that energy use we talked about, and also algorithmic bias, making sure AI doesn't just bake in existing inequalities.
So different angles, different priorities, even with the shared goal. And it's not just the Senate weighing in.
No, absolutely. Over in the House, Representative Hank Johnson, for example, he's been emphasizing responsible innovation, but also really hammering the need to protect U.S. intellectual property from theft, particularly mentioning China.
Right. IP protection. Okay. So we have the industry pushing for light touch, lawmakers raising various flags.
Mm-hmm.
What actual policies might we see coming out of this?
Well, Senator Cruz's regulatory sandbox bill is definitely one to watch. We talked about the goals: foster innovation, block state overreach, build the domestic supply chain. Industry seems keen on that.
And the White House, their overall direction.
The administration's definitely leaning deregulatory. That Executive Order 14179, removing barriers to American leadership in artificial intelligence, sets the tone. And they're supposed to release an AI action plan soon, maybe mid-year, which should give more detail.
You already saw one rule change, right? The chip export one.
Yeah, the AI diffusion rule. That got rescinded. Industry liked that, arguing it freed them up to sell more globally and kept customers from looking elsewhere, like China.
Okay. But even with that deregulatory trend, there are still bipartisan efforts to put some guardrails in place. It's not a total free-for-all.
No, exactly. There's still movement on specific issues like the Test AI Act of 2025. That's about boosting the government's ability to actually test and evaluate AI systems using NIST and the DOE.
So building up expertise to understand the tech better.
Right. And then Senator Klobuchar, she's got a couple of bills. One is the Artificial Intelligence Research, Innovation, and Accountability Act, aiming for some baseline rules for high-risk AI, more transparency.
Accountability for high-risk stuff. Makes sense.
And the other one, the No Fakes Act. That's targeting deepfakes directly, trying to protect people's voices and likenesses from being faked by AI without permission.
Okay, tackling a very specific visible problem there. And didn't something already pass related to fake images?
Yeah, the Take It Down Act. That makes it illegal to share private, intimate images without consent, and it specifically includes AI-generated fakes. That one's through Congress, just needs the president's signature.
Got it. And other hearings are happening too.
Yeah, the House has looked at things like AI and trade secrets, AI and competition. It's a busy area.
Okay, one last big piece here. This tension between federal rules and state rules. You mentioned the patchwork fear.
It's a major friction point. Yeah, you've got almost 1,000 state-level AI bills floating around as of early this year. Creates huge uncertainty.
And the industry and Senator Cruz, they want
a single federal approach. Cruz explicitly wants to stop unnecessary state overregulation. The argument, you see it in legal articles too, is that only federal preemption can really prevent this patchwork from slowing down U.S. innovation.
If it's streamlined, keep it national.
That's the push.
So what does this all mean? Pulling it all together after this deep dive.
Okay, so summing up, you've got the industry pushing hard for light federal rules, mostly because they're worried about global competition, especially China. Tied to that is this massive need for infrastructure, energy, data centers. It's not optional, it's essential. The global scene is viewed very much as a race, a strategic competition, with the U.S. wanting its tech stack to win out. But yeah, there's still real anxiety in Congress and beyond about the risks, deepfakes, bias, privacy, security. So you see these specific legislative efforts trying to put up some guardrails.
And that whole federal versus state fight looming over it all.
Exactly. That's a huge unresolved question. How much power stays with the states versus a unified federal approach?
Okay. Well, that gives us a much clearer picture. Thanks for breaking all that down.
My pleasure.
And for you, our listener, here's something to chew on. How does this American light touch, maybe federally focused approach stack up against what others are doing? You know, China's very state-driven model, the EU focusing hard on rights and risks. What are the long-term pros and cons of each path? For innovation, sure, but also for security, for society, for our values.
Yeah.
Something to think about. Thank you for joining us. See you next time.